There it is indeed time for the Sunday sermon. Now, last week, you'll recall I talked about concerned communities with regard to the filling up of hundreds and hundreds of hotels in towns and villages and cities up and down the country. And this Sunday, I want you to we're going to have to focus a little bit, folks, on maths. You might need a pen and paper, or if you're really tech, then you can work it all out on your iPhone or iPad or whatever. Because we need to look at the numbers that's going on with the legal and illegal asylum backlog. Because as you know, our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, he has said that it's one of his key 5 priorities, not only to stop the boats, but also to deal with the backlog, which has grown and grown and is in the order of 166,000 asylum seekers awaiting determination, and that number is rising. And we heard this week how Sunak's going to deal with it. The first lucky 12,000, they will get a multiple choice questionnaire, it's almost like a sort of GCSE type paper, 10 pages or so, with fairly simple questions like, have you ever been involved in terrorist activity? Yes or no? Well, that's not a complicated one if you want to get accepted. So we sort of know that first 12,000, you can assume that at least 95% of those will be accepted. But no one's asking the question, well, then what? And I'm pretty sure that having got through the first 12,000, there'll be another 12,000 that get another 10-page questionnaire. And then another 12. Do you see? So that by the end of this year, Sunak will be able to say, oh, look how wonderfully we've got the backlog down. Well, anybody can get a backlog down if you send a bunch of questionnaires out there and give them as long as 3 weeks to fill it in. I mean, that's not difficult, is it? And then that it's just going to be determined and accepted without even so much as human interaction or an interview. No, it's just going to be done by the computer. The computer says you can stay or you can go. And so that's what is likely to happen. And I suspect that this year, if that progresses, you could have in the order of 125,000 asylum seekers granted asylum. It's effectively open season. Basically, it's an amnesty. But don't worry, the Prime Minister can then announce he's got the backlog down. Well, anybody can open the backlog if you just accept them all with the stroke of a computer keyboard. But of course, what will that say to others? It'll be a massive, massive draw. If people see there's an amnesty, they'll think, well, there'll be another amnesty, and there'll be another 12,000 questionnaires coming down the pipe. So the more that we approve, the more will come. And it's only late February, and already we know there's 100% more channel crossings this year than last year, despite those bold words on the 3rd of January from our Prime Minister, who said he will stop the boats. Well, it's not exactly deterring them so far, is it? Exactly the opposite. So if you again apply the maths, and I'm sorry to be a bit mathematical on a Sunday morning when you might still be enjoying breakfast, some of you might still be in bed. But it's important because last year there were some 46,000 channel crossings. So if you apply that 100% through the year, then you're going to get over 90,000. Well, maybe that's too much, surely not. Well, let's rein it back a bit. 80,000, who knows? What that actually means, of course, under this new method of treating the backlog, is that those new asylum seekers will also probably end up with questionnaires, and you can assume that another 90% plus may well be accepted. So we're just going to sort of add this up, shall we? Oh, hang on. No, we've got to wait a bit, because no one's talking about the extended family members. And this is really important. Pay attention, my friends, because the UK rules say that you can have a spouse or partner, so that if you've had an asylum application accepted, then your spouse or partner and any children that you've got under the age of 18, or that may claim to be under the age of 18, that then they can come over too as part of your family. Indeed, if you've got children over the age of 18, but who may need, if they're not living independently, if they can't look after themselves independently, or indeed if there's just a sort of special case, then they can come as well. And you've got charities, noble, wonderful charities like the Refugee Council. They're saying that actually we need to extend this definition of family, not from immediate, to a much wider remit. Cousins and uncles and all sorts, parents, grandparents. But the reality is, now, the data's not very good, but look at Germany. Back in 2015, it was worked out in Germany where they have broader extended family. They were looking at between 4 to 8 members of an extended family coming over. So let's call that an average of 6. Well, we're not quite that bad. The UK Home Office data is not that good, but it seems to be around about 1 for 1 extended family coming over. But bearing in mind that I don't think we've got much trust in the competence of Home Office officials who've allowed this backlog to grow so much, it could well be the extended family from an asylum seeker that's accepted. That could be 1.5, could be two extra people. And that's before you apply the thought process of the traffickers and the money. Because where there's money involved, yes, you can imagine there'll be all sorts of false claims. Someone claiming that this is their child when actually it's not. It's someone who's paid £1,000 or a couple of £1,000 to claim to be someone's child or partner. So you can see there's going to be a huge industry in false claims as this amnesty grows throughout 2023. So I suspect what you could have through this year, grants that are approved, asylum seeker grants approved, could well top 200,000 applications. And so Sunak will say, I've got the backlog down. So that's much of the historic backlog. And then they'll say, we're on top of the current year's applications. But then if you apply, let's say, an average of 1.5 extended family members, on your 200,000, that's another 300,000. So that by sort of mid to late 2024, you could be looking at 200,000 plus 300,000, totaling 500,000. I know the maths is a bit tedious on a Sunday morning, but it's important, you see, because that number's more than all the asylum seekers that have legally been accepted since 2015 at just over 400,000. And all of this, of course, is over and above the accepted asylum seekers, quite rightly, from the Ukrainian war, those asylum seekers from the applicants under the Hong Kong scheme because of what China's done under the national security law. This is on top of that. I mean, the Hong Kong applicants is well over 100,000. I think Ukrainian applicants is some 200,000. So we're talking some quite big numbers here. Now, some will say this is marvellous, this is lovely. We've got, we've got increasing diversity. But let's remember, of the illegal crossings across the Channel, many of these young men, 87% of them are men indeed, many of them come from very different cultures with very, very different attitudes, particularly towards women and girls, sometimes abhorrent attitudes. So we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Now, where's everybody going to go? We've got an affordable housing crisis already in the UK for our own citizens. So the pressure on social housing will grow, the pressure on public services. And we're talking well over, just on the asylum seeker backlog, plus the extended family, we're talking well over a year's worth of house buildings. So you can see how waiting lists will grow. It's hard enough to see a GP or a dentist. Now you think that's fine, we might muddle through. There's a bit more diversity, so that's nice, some will say. But how well will this fit into communities? They're already struggling with the cost of living crisis. We've already got protests going on. How significantly will this change the cultural and demographic shape of parts of the United Kingdom, with the consequent implications? Because if you think about it, these numbers, it's almost 1% increase in the population just of asylum seekers crossing the Channel plus their extended family. That's over and above those that I mentioned. And that's over and above the normal immigration. Last year to June 2022, it was 504,000 net, 1.1 million gross. So when you add it all up with your pen or whether you've got your calculator out, we're talking about an increase in the population every year of about 1.5%, at least. These are big numbers. Now, some of these people will be very skilled, some will be completely unskilled. But not many will actually really have any form of wealth they're bringing themselves. So what you're doing is actually, from the wealth of the nation, when you add these numbers, you're dividing an increasing number of people into the same wealth of the nation, which has the mathematical effect of making us all that little bit poorer. And you might say it doesn't matter over a year or two, but what happens if you apply this over a decade? All of a sudden we could be 8, 9, 10% poorer. And it's a question of degree, isn't it? We've always been a hospitable, welcoming nation. But this degree is changing. When we've got our own crisis, haven't we? Because the reality is, as I've said before, we've got over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits. And many of these asylum seekers, they will get work. But we have to be honest, many may not, and they will end up also on benefits, because once you're granted asylum under the rules, you have the same rights as anybody else and the same right to benefits and such like. So these are big, big numbers here. Now, in the last 15 to 20 years, the population of the UK increased by some 10 million or so, around about 15 to 17%. So what happens if you get another 1.5% every single year? That's another 10 to 15% over the next decade. How are people going to feel if, as I've just shown mathematically, we're going to get that little bit poorer? The truth is, people don't feel any wealthier than a decade ago already. And the question is that because of a lack of economic growth? Is there a link to the increase in numbers divided into the same wealth? Is it because we're taxed too much? Is it because of the burdensome regulations, or a combination of all of these things? Is it a coincidence that people are feeling poorer when the population has increased so significantly? Maybe it is. Maybe it's linked. What I do think is we absolutely need to have a national conversation about this. Because if this process of approving asylum seekers by questionnaire, by multiple choice, if that goes on through this year for the bulk of the asylum seeker backlog in order to satisfy the Prime Minister's target of getting the backlog down, then you're going to invite more and more people to make that perilous journey. And it's effectively an amnesty, a sort of open borders. And I'm not sure that's what the country wants. But give us a call, 0344 499 1000, with your thoughts. And with that, here endeth my Sunday sermon.